Of you have ever made excuses? We're going to see in just a few moments, because I'm going to give you a whole load of them. And I think sometimes we don't realize how many excuses we actually do make in life. We make excuses for everything. And we're going to see that this morning. And we're going to be in Exodus chapter 3, and we're going to look some in chapter number 4. And we're going to meet a man that all of us have at least heard of. His name is Moses. He wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch. And we're going to see that when God showed up on the backside of the Midian desert, 40 years after Moses had taken things into his own hands and wanted to help one of his Hebrew brothers out, and didn't want to be the next Pharaoh, the next Egyptian to rise to the platform. He wanted to be identified with his people, but his people didn't take it the right way. They said, "We don't need your help." Moses had to flee for his life, and 40 years later, God shows up. And when God shows up, Moses is a different man than he was 40 years earlier. And this great man of God that's going to go on to be a great man of God is going to have all kind of excuses of why he cannot do what God has called him to do. We're going to look at the scripture here in just a moment because it's a kind of a long story. I'm going to paraphrase some of it, but when we get down to the excuses, I definitely want to read that. I don't think I put all that in there because I wanted you to have the background that led up to it, and then I'm going to read some of those verses in the latter part of chapter number 3 and into chapter number 4. Let me start by giving you a pretty good size introduction here about excuses and how when we do use them, all we're really doing is putting up a self-imposed roadblock. It actually stops us. It actually hinders us, and it holds us back, because excuses are for the weak, and responsibility is for the strong. And a lot of times what we're doing when we make excuses is just trying to get out of responsibility. Either responsibility that is optional, or even being responsible for the actions of your own life, being responsible for your choices. I mean, we'll even make excuses for that and come up with all kind of reasons of why we shouldn't be held directly accountable and responsible. All of us are here this morning, and we have our reality that we're in right now. So your reality is different than everybody else's. Your reality of where you're at in life, where you're at in your relationship with God, and even really where you are mentally and spiritually is unique in and of you and yourself. And even if something is not really a reality in your life, if you perceive it to be true, then it is a reality for you. And the reason why you perceive it to be true is because you've allowed patterns in your mind. You've allowed, if somebody told you you were a loser, you were a failure, you were no good, you'll never amount to anything, those things played in your mind over and over and over, the mind being the control center. Those thoughts took up root in your life, and you perceive things about yourself that God doesn't perceive. You look at yourself as someone who could never do A, B, or C of what God is calling you to do, when in fact, God says you can. God's calling you to that, but you're allowing your reality to hold you back, of excuses, of things that have taken root in your mind, of thinking that you can't step out of that comfort zone and take that risk and take that step of faith. So we've got our reality, but then we've got our dreams of where we want our life to go. The dreams that God has for us, the call that He has upon our life, the big picture, and then we've got the strategy. How are we going to accomplish those dreams and accomplish the purpose that God has called us to? Now, in the midst of all of that, we use excuses, and excuses just hold us back. Ben Franklin said this. He said, "He that is good for making excuses is seldom good for anything else." Some of you have the gift of making excuses. I know, because I know I have. That's your spiritual gift, and you use it well. You got a whole package of excuses that you use to be able to exempt yourself from responsibility and being a part of the body and a functioning part of the body. Excuses are for losers. We've all said that. If you're a coach or you've got children and you're trying to teach them to be competitive, we know, we've always said it, excuses are for losers, because no sense in sitting around making excuses of why you didn't achieve something or why you didn't accomplish something, because you'll never make progress by making excuses. Just take the lump, take responsibility, work harder, and be able to go further in life. You see, the excuses will always be there, but the opportunities that God gives you will not always be there. See, the opportunity that you have today might not be there tomorrow. The open door that God has put in before you today, and the opportunity of the call and the purpose that He has for you and the ministry that He has for you, it's there today. It's an opportunity, a great opportunity, but it might not be there tomorrow. But excuses will always be there. And we've got these excuses down to an art form. I mean, we know how to make excuses to avoid responsibility. We know how to make excuses for our sin and for our behavior. I mean, like for our sin. I mean, like we go off on somebody and, you know, that's just how God made me. And if they didn't want me to do that, then they shouldn't have done what they done to me. They know that that irritates me and makes me mad. And we point the finger all back to them, and we're pointing away, making excuses for everything from A to Z. So let me ask you this morning, what's your excuse? Now we're going to see in just a moment that Moses had 5 of them. And actually the last one, Moses said, God, just find somebody else. Somebody else can do this a whole lot better than I can do it. But we hear these excuses. I'm going to give you a bunch of them, okay? You write down how many of them you used. First of all, it can't be done. You ever have people tell you that in your life? It can't be done. You know, we've tried that here. We've never been able to do it. It can't be done. It's too big. I'm already serving somewhere else. I've already served. I've already done my duty. That's too big of a jump from where I'm at to where you're asking me to go to. I'm damaged goods. Man, if you just knew me, Pastor, I'm damaged. I don't have it all together. I got a past and I've got a present, and I'm just a messed up person trying to hold it together. I'm damaged goods. I have nothing to offer. I have no creativity. I don't have a lot of gifts and a lot of skills. I just don't have anything to offer. Let someone else do it. Let me get down to all of them that we've all used. I'm tired. I'm too busy. I have no energy. Oh, you know, I got kids now. I don't have a babysitter. You know, I tried that before and I failed at it and it didn't work out. I tried to start that class before and couldn't get anyone connected to it and coming to it. It's too hard. I'm too old. I'm too young. It's too hot. It's too hot in that church. I don't want to go to that church. That Sunday school room they put us in, it's too hot in the church and it's too cold over there. I'm too short. I'm too tall. I'm too shy. I can't drive. You know, if I could drive, I'd come over there and help you out with that, God. But I just can't get there. I can't afford it. It's boring. Man, y'all ever listen to Pastor Jeff? It's just boring. I mean, I want to be connected to the church. I want to go to church and I like it, but it's just boring over there. It's just not working for me. I can't sing. I know you want me to sing and be a part of the choir, but I can't sing. And that you're asking me to do, God's out of my comfort zone. Man, I've never led people before. I've never spoken in front of people before. I lost my phone. I forgot about it. Man, that's a good one. I lost my phone and I forgot all about that thing that God wanted me to be at. You know, I'm really busy and I got a lot of things to do and I just ran out of time. You know what? We got time for anything that is important. See, every one of us here this morning is going to give our life to something. Everybody here is going to you're giving your life to something right now. It's either you're giving your life to yourself, your career, a hobby. I mean, something has dominance in your life right now over everything else. Why not just give your life to God? Why not just give it to Him and prioritize Him and seek Him and pursue Him? He's the one that made you, created you. He's the one that knows how to fulfill you. He's the one that knows how to bless you. He already knows the purpose that He has for you, the calling that He has for your life. He knows exactly what you can do and what you can't do, how far to push you, the step of faith that you can take now. He already knows that. So therefore, God is not going to put a task in front of you that you can't do and that you can't accomplish. And if you think you can do it or you think you can accomplish it, then maybe the pride element is there, because anything we do for God is bigger than us. Anything we do for God, even if we love it, is still in a category of its own, because we are doing something for His kingdom and for His glory. And right now, God has the door open for so many of us, for our church, for your family, for your life. And we need to step through that door. Step into your future. Connect your life to God. Go beyond your comfort zone. Get out of the box. Do something that your eye cannot see and your mind cannot comprehend at the present moment. You don't know how it's all going to work out. You just know that God is saying, do it. Do it. And you know what? That's a step of faith. Number one, there's a great opportunity in front of you. You know, that's the thing about God. Anytime He calls us, anytime He does anything in His Word, man, when He says, follow me, or He's telling us in His Word of what needs to be a part of our lives, you know, from our attitude, from loving others and being kind to others, forgiving others, to our worship, our singing, our praise, being thankful, being grateful, our giving of our first fruits, being connected to the body, that everyone has a place and everyone has a responsibility. Everything that God tells us in His Word that He wants us to be a part of and that He wants us to do is a step of faith that we have to take. And it's a great opportunity that He's putting right in front of you. And He's asking you to be available. He's asking you to be a vessel for honor, a vessel that he can do something through, because ultimately, it's really not about me. It's ultimately about him. And if I make my life about him and about God, my life about me will be so much better if I make my life about him. See, when I make my life about him and I seek him and I love him and I pursue him, I might not have everything in my flesh that I want, but I have everything in my flesh that I need. I have everything in my spirit that I need. And most of all, I have all those things that a career can't accomplish and that money can't buy. I have all those things that bring life to life, peace and joy, and I'm able to serve others and able to give to others humbly, and God has blessed me, and that is a tremendous place to be in life, to where God makes things better for your life, better than you ever thought they could ever be. And you know what? God is telling each and every one of us in here this morning that he's got great plans for you. You're sitting there, and you've been sitting here, and maybe you've been here for years, maybe you've been in church for years, and you're like thinking, yeah, what are those great plans that God has for me? I mean, really, if God has a great plan to me, why don't he burn up a bush and not consume it and start talking to me out of the bush so that I'll know that that's what he wants me to do? You know what? No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. You know why I know you wouldn't? Because this book right here tells me in the New Testament that Peter, in the book of Peter, he said that we have a more sure word than the Old Testament people did. See, Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, so there was no Bible. There was no God to learn about. Moses was learning it. Day by day, moment by moment. We've got it all right here. We've got the recorded Word of God living right here, breathing right here. We've got it. Old Testament, New Testament, the living, breathing Word of God, and yet we're still making excuses and telling God why we can't sacrifice, why we can't give our time, why we can't be connected to that, why we can't open up our mouths and witness to our friends and to our families. And you know what? God is not interested in any of those excuses that you have and I have. God is only interested in one thing: obedience. And you know what? You're the same way as a parent. You don't want to hear your kids make excuses. You don't want to hear them. I mean, kids are brilliant at it. They learn it. You don't even have to teach it. They immediately, as soon as they know how, point to the brother, point to the sister. They know how to do it. They know how to work it. Adam and Eve did the same thing. Adam said, "It's that woman you gave me." Eve said, "It was the serpent." I mean, we've learned it through the years to point in every direction but at ourselves. God only wants one thing, and that's obedience. He doesn't want any excuses. The question comes down to, will you trust me? Will you follow me? Will you believe me? Now, Moses, if you get the background of his life, you know, his mother, put him in that little crate and he floated down the river, and he winds up being blessed. His childhood winds up being blessed. He's raised by Pharaoh's daughter, and he has the best education that you could ever have. He's raised in the best environment that you can be raised in. He has everything that a child could ever want. He has every remote control car that comes out, and all of the new iPhones, iPads, iWatches. I mean, Moses had it all, because that is what he was connected to. He was connected to Egyptian royalty. But Moses was a what? He was a Hebrew. Moses was not an Egyptian, even though he was being raised as one. Moses knew who he was on the inside. He knew he was a Hebrew. He knew he was an Israelite. And you can read in the book of Hebrews that that's who he chose to identify with. He wanted to identify with God. He wanted to identify with God's people because he knew that's who he was. So at the age of 40, he's out there in the neighborhood and he sees one of his Hebrew brothers, an Israelite, that is being beaten by an Egyptian. That Egyptian is over there wearing them out. Moses said, enough is enough. He goes over there. He confronts that Egyptian. He starts whooping on him. And the Bible says he looked to the left. He looked to the right. He thought no one was watching. And he took the Egyptian's life. But he did not realize that you can never run ahead of God. He thought he was defending his brother, and he was going to step up and name the name of God and identify with his people. But see, with God, timing is everything. And his Hebrew brothers didn't even understand what he just did, and they confronted him and said, we don't need you to be our protector and our deliverer. And because of that, Moses had to flee for his life. And the Bible tells us that Moses left the Egyptian palace and he went to the backside of the Midian desert. I mean, out in the middle of nowhere. Can you imagine leaving the Egyptian palace and going to the backside of the Midian desert? Man, what a shock. A life change. 40 years Moses is over there on the backside of the desert. And you know what he's doing? He's a shepherd. And he's out there tending the flocks. Jethro, his father-in-law, he's just out there on the backside of the desert hiding and just doing what shepherds do. And one day he's out there 40 years later and he looks over there across the way and he sees a bush burning. And it's unlike anything he's ever saw before. It was burning, it was on fire, it was an inferno, but the bush was still the bush. It wasn't being consumed. So he walks over there to the bush, and all of a sudden the bush starts talking and says, Moses, Moses. And you know what Moses said? He said, here am I, Lord. And then the bush, God told him to remove the sandals from your feet, for where you are standing is holy ground. In other words, what Moses was getting the word on was that the presence of God was all around him right there in front of that bush. I mean, Moses was having an experience and an encounter with God. And it was a holy encounter. It was an encounter to where Moses just needed to hear what God said and respond to it and follow it. It was just one of those encounters that we would love to have with God. And you know what? The great thing about it is we can have those encounters with God every day. We can enter into holy ground every day. We can experience God and encounter God every day and connect with him. He's there at this bush and all of a sudden he starts getting his directions. And God said, I've heard the cry of my people. He says, I've watched the Egyptians use them and abuse them, and it's time now for me to step in and deliver them. And Moses, I'm going to use you. Notice what he says there. Chapter number 3, verse number 10. Says, therefore, come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. I'm going to deliver my people. And you, Moses, that fled the Egyptian palace 40 years earlier, you're going to go back and you're going to tell Pharaoh, I'm going to use you. You're going to be my spokesman, my man, my messenger to let Pharaoh know, God said, let his people go. Man, it sounds like an awesome assignment, doesn't it? Man, what an awesome door and an open door, an opportunity for Moses. But notice these 5 things. First of all, point A. Who am I? And what Moses is going to focus on is his inability. He wants to focus on what his abilities do not include. Notice what he says there. Excuse number 1. I'm going to read it. He says, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Now, you could think, man, at the beginning, man, Moses has got some humility. He's going to go on to be the most meekest man that ever lived. Moses was meek, and that was a compliment. He was full of humility. But this was more of a statement of, who am I, God? Who am I? I can't do that. I don't have that ability. I don't have that gift set, that skill set, God. I can't go back there. I'm the last one here that could be able to do such a thing. God, that's not me. That's out of my box. I'm not the right person to be able to go back to my home and tell Pharaoh to let your people go. Sometimes we just think we're just a nobody. We think that we're not worthy enough. And you know what? We are just a nobody, and we're really not worthy enough. But God wants to use us as we are. You see, if you're waiting for your life to be worthy and to be acceptable in every way, you're never going to do anything for God. Because guess what? You'll never be worthy. You'll never be acceptable. You hear people say all the time, and they just miss it. They say, when I get my life together, I'm going to start going to church. No, you got it backwards. You go to church to encounter God to get your life together. You keep coming to church to hold your life together. You don't get your life together out there and then come in here and say, okay, I got it together. I'm here, God. I'm ready now. No, you don't have it together. And you know what? Even when you think you do got it together, you don't have it together. And God will show you don't have it together, because the only way that we can ever do anything for God is for us to be totally dependent upon Him. So Moses said, God, I'm just not a leader. But you know what God said? God assured him, and he said, notice what he tells them there. He says, I will be with you. I will be you. That voice coming out of the bush. What did the voice say all through this book of Hebrews? Especially, I will never leave you nor forsake you. I'm in front of you, I'm beside you, I'm behind you. I'm going to be with you every step of the way. Yeah, there's going to be times when you're walking by faith that your eye can't see it and your mind can't comprehend it. But guess what? The God who called you in that direction, the God who called you there and put that desire there is already there, and He's right there with you in the now, taking the step with you to get you to there. Number 2. He says, what will I say? So he thinks he is inadequate. Notice what he says there. He says, Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what's his name? Moses wanted a reference letter. I mean, he wanted one that was notarized and stamped with a local government stamp on it so that he could let Pharaoh know that what he was coming to tell him was legitimate. Who sent me? What am I going to tell them, God? What name am I going to just drop on them? And you know what God said? God says, tell them I am that I am sent you. Tell them I am sent you. This is in the book of Exodus. If you were here last week, we looked at a lot of things in the book of John. In the book of John was written to let us know that Jesus was the Son of God. So the I am statement there is over and over. I am, the great I am. The great I am, resurrection and life. The great I am, way, truth and life. The great I am, shepherd. The great I am, bread of life. I mean, he's the great I am. Tell them I am, that I am sent you. Yeah, I'm going to go to them, God, and I'm going to tell them the great I am sent me. I'm going to tell them that the one, now the great I am, basically I am that I am, actually means what John 1:1 said. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. In other words, tell them I am. That means that I was there in eternity past. I'm right now in eternity present. I'm already in the future. I'm Alpha, Omega, beginning, end, first, last. I mean, I'm everywhere. I'm everything. That's really what he was telling. He was telling Pharaoh. And he says, I'm just not ready for that. How many times do we say that? God, I'm just not ready for that. It's too big for me. You know what? You're more ready today than you were yesterday. It's always going to be bigger than you. It's always going to be something you can't wrap your arms around. It's always going to be something you can't comprehend. It wouldn't be faith if it was something you could see and something you could latch onto. You can see His Word, and you can stand on His Word and know that that is the best hope you could ever have. It's a foundation and assurance and comfort that you can know that what God has said in His Word, He will accomplish. That's great, but you'll still never be able to wrap your head around it. You'll still never be able to add up the math and make it make sense. Be able to analyze the English and be able to comprehend it in a way that you can read it and understand it. It's always bigger than you, higher than you. Always. Number 3. Notice he says, number 3, he says, what if? And what he's going to talk about here is his insecurity. Notice what he says there, chapter number 4. Let's look at verse number 1. Moses answered, what if they don't believe me? I go there and I tell them the great I am sent me, the one who was, who is, and who will ever always be. What if they don't believe me? We use that one all the time, don't we? What if they ask me a question that I can't answer? I mean, God tells us to go and tell everybody about Jesus, and we're sitting there. The first excuse we have is, what if they ask me a question I don't know the answer to? Let me give it to you. I don't know. But let me tell you what I do know. I do know that where my life was at. I do know what I was. I do know the thoughts that I used to think and the deeds that I used to do. And I'm telling you, I was dead in my trespasses and sin. God, the resurrection and life, He opened up my eyes and He saw, I was able to see for myself the wretched sinner that I was. And I gave my heart and life to Him, and He gave me a new heart and a new life. And I'm not perfect now, but I've got things in my life that I never had there. I've got peace and joy, and He's with me, and I'm growing in Him. And He is always for me and never against me. I don't know everything that you're asking me, but let me just keep telling you what I do know. That's all God said. God just said, be a what? Be a witness. A witness only tells what he knows and what he saw and what he experienced. God's not asking you to be a theologian. God's not asking you to have the answers to everything. Just tell somebody what He's done for you and be excited about it and contagious about it. And just have humility when you say, I don't know. And that's where Moses was. He was insecure. And you know what? There ain't an insecure thing about us when it comes to talking. We'll talk about We'll talk about that person, that family. We'll talk about that gossip. We'll use our mouth to be able to contaminate and corrupt other people. And man, we'll take it and we'll make it bigger and bigger and bigger. We ain't got no problem talking. Yeah, God appeared to you, Moses, in that bush. Yeah, right, prove it. God knew that was going to happen, so he told him to take that staff and throw it on the ground, and he became a snake. And he gives them all these things that this staff is going to be able to do. And when he gets before Pharaoh, he's going to be able to do these signs to be able to prove to Pharaoh that the great I Am did actually send him. And you know what? We're always fearful of failure. And they say, man, Michael Jordan, he missed more shots than anybody in NBA history. But he'll go down as the greatest or one of the greatest of all time. You see, if you're going to have any success in life, you're going to have failure. Yeah, we're sinful, we're flesh, we're going to fall short. There's going to be times we don't do what we should do. We don't say what we should say. But if we're going through the open doors and we're available, we're going to have great successes. And we're going to have great accomplishments. And God is going to be able to use us to minister and to encourage and bring life. Number 4, D. He says, I can't. And he says, I can't because, notice what he says there in verse number 9 of chapter number 4. Moses said, O Lord, I have never been eloquent. Moses had a stuttering problem. Anybody that's got a stuttering problem would be terrified of what? Having to speak publicly. Nothing wrong with having a stuttering problem, but if God is asking you to use that publicly, it'd be a huge step. So here, Moses is focusing on his infirmity, his weakness. Man, I'm not strong at that, God. The last thing that I would ever be would be a speaker. I mean, I can't get that speech thing together, God. I don't have those skills. And you know what? God said, I will be your mouth. God has got a remedy for every excuse we come up with. There's not an excuse that's ever going to be legitimate. But Moses keeps on about it. And God says, okay, I'll send big mouth Aaron with you. He doesn't have any problem talking. So if you get there in front of Pharaoh and you have a loss for words, which I don't believe he did, Aaron will be there to be able to step up and let Pharaoh know exactly what I told you. What weakness do you keep saying, God, I got this weakness, I can't do that, I can't do that? Number 5, the worst one of all. He goes through all these things and he gets down there for verse number 13 of chapter number 4. And then Moses said, oh Lord, please send somebody else to do it. He's went through the whole list of all of his inability, his infirmity, his insecurity. Now he gets down to the last one, and I guess it's indifference is what I put. But maybe he was afraid, fearful. I'm sure that he was. But he just literally tells God, God, find somebody else to do it. And you know what? Ultimately, we're just like Moses. We'll throw this one out there, throw that one out there. And if A don't work, B don't work, C don't work, D don't work, we'll eventually get to where we'll just tell God, just find somebody else to do it. Somebody else will be better at it than me. Just get somebody else and take me out of the deal. Moses tried to get out of doing what God called him to do, but guess what? God wouldn't let him do it. And it says that his anger burned against him, and it didn't take long for Moses to gather himself together and realize, man, that God talking out of that bush means business, and I better start moving these feet and obey the one that is calling me to enter through that open door. Number two, not only the great door in front of you, but there's always going to be ground opposition around you. Now, I started out by telling you your perceived reality. That's going to be number one. That's going to be your biggest hurdle. Your biggest hurdle is the reality that you perceive in your mind, even if it's not true. Because I'm telling you, God said this right here is the control center, and this right here is powerful. So if you have told yourself in your mind, if voices through your past or present relationships or whatever life has dealt you, and you've allowed those patterns to sink into your mind, you feel like you're a nothing. You feel like you're a nobody. You feel like you could never do anything. Life has beat you down, and other people have beat you down so much in life that it is your perceived reality that you are no good, that you will never be no good, that you will never accomplish anything in life, that you will never have anything in life. And the first thing that you have to deal with is you have to start replacing those negative, destructive thoughts, those strongholds that have been built up in your mind with what God says about you. I should have got an amen on that one. We've allowed other people to get in there, the enemy to get in there. Now we got to let God get in there. They say it takes 21 days to break a habit, and that's just the beginning of the process of what we have to do with our mind. That's the reason why the Bible said we got to feed on the Word of God. We got to meditate on the Word of God. It's got to be something that we dwell on, something that we eat. So, that word meditate means like cows. I mean, cows really get the best end of the deal. Not only they get to eat a good meal, they get to bring it back up and eat it a second time and a third time. I mean, cows have really been blessed. That's what that word meditate means. It means to chew on it, swallow it. Start digesting it, and as you're thinking about it, bring that word back up and chew on it some more. Keep chewing on it and dwelling on it and meditating on it. See, if you're sitting there and you're like thinking, that ain't going to work, you ain't never tried it. You ain't never tried it. It's just like a song that you hear first thing in the morning. You sing it all day long. If you would really saturate your mind with this word and meditate on it, you would think on whatever it is you saturated your mind with all day long. And you got to start saturating your mind with, this is what God says about me. I am a somebody. I am a child of God. I'm not who I used to be. I am forgiven. I'm worth much. I am a child of the King, gifted with gifts. I have a purpose. God has desires for me, and my life means something. It meant enough for God to send His Son to die for me. And I am somebody, and God has a plan for me. You got to overcome you. Maybe you got to overcome a person in your life. That ground opposition. Maybe there's a boyfriend you need to eliminate. Because I'm telling you, this is the deal. If he or she is not what you need to be able to go further with God before you get married, they won't be the person that will take you further with God after you get married. If they're not loving God and living for God before you get married, you're not going to change it. So you don't need anybody in your life that's going to hold you back from what God has for you. Nobody. Now, if you got them, you got them. You can't do anything about that. You're stuck. You just pray. You pray for them. You pray for them. But don't get yourself into that, because all you got to do is look at what they do now. Whatever they do now, they'll do. It's a person. For some of us, it's a trial, maybe trauma that we've went through. and it's just collapsed our life, devastated our life, and your reality is just one of just trying to breathe every day, and that's fine. That's all right through the grieving process and getting to where God wants you to be. But no matter where you're at in that category, don't let your reality steal your dreams from you. Your reality's real, but don't let it steal the dreams that God has for you. The enemy just wants to steal, kill, and destroy, and he's good at it. Number 3, not only ground opposition, but there's giant obstacles always that are facing you. Giant obstacles, always. Man, all Moses knew at this moment was Pharaoh. He had no idea that that God was going to have to use all those plagues to be able to, because Pharaoh's heart just kept getting harder and harder and harder. And God kept coming with it and coming with it. And eventually, Pharaoh got to the point at that last plague where, let him go. When all those firstborn started dying the Passover, the children of Israel were what? Set free, and they were on their way. But didn't take long. Old Pharaoh realized, we got to go after them. I made a mistake. Let me go get them. Now the children of Israel and Moses was trapped between the Egyptian army and the Red Sea. You see, even after you deal with Pharaoh, there's a Red Sea waiting for you up the road. And then even after they get through the Red Sea, it's not going to be long to where Moses now, the one who said he couldn't talk, the one who said he didn't have any ability, the one who said that he was inadequate to be able to do any of these things that God was asking him to do, was going to be leading millions of people across the Red Sea, across the desert, into the Promised Land, and these people were going to grumble and mumble and complain like you've never seen before. And Moses is going to have, man, they're thirsty and they won't hush. And he's going to see that that staff is going to make water come out of the rock. He's going to have a remedy to be able to make those bitter waters sweet. You see, there's always these obstacles out there, but just know this. For every obstacle that's going to be out there and the door that God opens up for you, it's just an opportunity for God to show up and show out, for you to experience God and encounter God, and for God to take you to another level. Number 4, all God's asking from you and from me is just God obedience, godly obedience, and that obedience starts right in the inside of your heart and of your life. God obedience. See, for some, you're saved, but you never really, you haven't grown. And sometimes it looks bigger to you, and the reason why it looks bigger to you than maybe the person sitting next to you, because it's almost like the analogy of, it's just like Claire. Man, I can take, and I did it the other night, and I'll never do it again. I've already done it a couple of times. I can take Beckham and I can take Maddox. Beckham and B, same person. I can take Beckham and Maddox, my 2 grandsons. I can flip them upside down. I can hold B behind with his legs behind my head and like do all kind of stuff, chunk them up in the air. Man, they just love it. Claire, on the other hand, if you just try to turn her upside down, buddy, you spark terror in the inside of her. And I mean, she don't even want to look at Papa no more after that, because she doesn't understand that no matter how fearful something may seem, Papa's never going to let you go. Papa's never going to drop you, I hope. But the kid, they don't perceive that. And, you know, as they get older, they realize, man, or after they experience, man, Dad is there, my father's there, God is there. But when you're just starting that journey, you got to crawl before you walk. You got to walk before you run. and you got to run before you soar. It's a process. And you got to start wherever you're at. And there's 3 ways we start in closing. We got to be God followers. That's what we got to be. Above everything else, we got to be a God follower. You don't want to be a pastor follower. You don't want to be a uncle follower, a granddaddy follower. You want to be a God follower. Hopefully your uncle and your granddaddy and all of them are following the same God you are, but ultimately you got to be a God follower. God, I'm with you. I'm following you. And I want you to take my life and do with it whatever it is that you have out there for me. Second of all, you not only need to be a God follower, you need to be a promise maker. There are to be days in our lives and weeks in our lives to where we're making promises to God. God, I promise promises that we follow through on. That's the third one. Not only promise makers, but promise keepers. Why wouldn't we want to make promises and vows to God of, God, I will do this. God, because you've been so good to me, I'm going to do this. And God, I'm going to serve you in this area. I'm going to give my all, God. I'm going to give it all. I'm not going to bring my leftovers to give to those kids at Upward. I'm going to give you my best, God. I'm going to come and I'm going to lay it all on the table. I'm going to come on Wednesday night and I'm not going to be tired and I'm not going to be grumpy. I'm going to have a good attitude and I'm going to minister to those children that you've given me to minister to, and I'm going to do it with a great attitude, going to do it with a smile. I'm going to give my best. You see, if we make those promises to God, we will be more apt to realize that that's the way we need to be. We need to give God our best. Our best. We always shove God to the side. Shove him to the side. And he's the last one on the list, or he's the one that we can easily maneuver out of the list to be able to make everything work in your life, when he ought to be the list. You with me? What's your excuse? I don't know what God's calling you to do. I know here at Lighthouse Church, we got a big vision. No way for a church to accomplish what God's put us here to accomplish without everybody. I was talking to somebody this morning about caring for people, letting people know that we miss them, letting people know that we're praying for them when they have a sickness, when they're going through a struggle. And the way we make that happen is it takes everybody. Now, granted, we got to have a plan, and we got to be organized, and we got to be structured, but it takes everybody connected to that for those things to be able to function in a way to where we're ministering inside of the body also. The last thing we need to do is give believers, people that are part of the body, an opportunity for the enemy to put something in their mind. They already got the perceived reality that nobody cares about them. All they need to do is go a week or 2 weeks and not be here and nobody call, and that reality is even reinforced to where they say, nobody cares about me. Nobody. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. You know that, I know that. And when you hear people say it sometimes, I never say it to people, but I just get in my car and I just say, cry, 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 cry. Shouldn't we be bigger than that? It's not about what you give me or don't give me. My focus is God. And if we'll make God our focus, then if you give me something, I'll see it's from God. If I don't get something, I'll see, God's got it covered. But when we're looking for other people to give us what only God can give us, we'll be frustrated. And not only will we be frustrated, we'll frustrate everybody else. But we still got to do all we can do. What's your excuse? Stop making them. Step up and say, God, I'm here. I'm available. Let's step up. Bow your heads. God, we're so thankful.